Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the BizNet webinar series, Consolidating Multiple Data Sources in Excel. My name is Floyd Stanley. I'll be your presenter today. My title at BizNet Software is Partner Enablement Manager, but I actually do quite a bit of things. So hopefully you'll get an understanding of how BizNet software can be used to consolidate multiple data sources, and certainly with our new BizConnectors. So today's agenda, and by the way, the session is being recorded and that will be made available to everyone. Right now I'm checking just a couple of questions to begin with, another question about the session being recorded. So yes, indeed, that will be available to everyone. And also, I'm going to leave some time at the end for questions. I'm setting myself a timer right now so that I'll make sure that we can get to those questions. If you have questions, please use the chat panel inside the GoToMeeting tool panel. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to compare and contrast Excel Power Query and some other data connectivity methods with BizConnectors from BizNet Software. We're going to see how to integrate multiple data sources in the same worksheet, which is something that previous polls have found is really quite important to everyone. And we're going to learn how to make any data source that can be exported into Excel available for consolidated reporting and get a sneak peek at some other direct connectors in the BizNet development roadmap. So we have a pretty full agenda and we can get started. There's no secret that there's a data explosion going on, and it just gets bigger and more complex every day. I'm a systems guy for a long time. I used to work with a SharePoint company, and we developed a method of directly connecting to different data sources and bringing that information into SharePoint as lists. And once they were in SharePoint as lists, you could track them, you could set reminders on them, you could put them in a Gantt timeline, you could do all kinds of great things with them. And it would be in a shared resource. It would be in a place where nobody could just go in and change the data or just walk away from the organization with it. And we were so proud of ourselves. And the first thing everybody said whenever we would implement one of these systems is, that's just really cool. Can I get it in Excel? Because that's the nature of the beast. I don't know if there's a billion users, but there are certainly lots and lots of users, and the reason is it's a common business language. You folks use it every day. It's in lots of different languages. It's interoperable among currencies and time zones and different systems. And in the web space, people talk about a presentation layer. Like in web, it's usually some kind of an HTML or maybe ASPX or maybe JavaScript front end where you can fill in blanks. Well, Excel is a presentation layer for business reporting. It's got all the fonts that you can imagine. It lets you do conditional formatting based upon certain parameters. You can even add little KPI sparklines and in-cell icons and do dynamic charting and certainly format the pages in a million different ways. So when you deal with numbers, when you deal with lists of any kind, of course you're going to use Excel. Now, I mentioned that we had done some recent polling, and in this case, I contend that Excel is the bottom line systems integrator. We ask, how many systems does your organization use to manage and track processes, whether those be ERP or CRM or payroll or expense or project or whatever? And a significant majority is dealing with 3 to 5 systems, And then what's interesting is like 23% more are dealing with 6 or more. So obviously, we have, as organizations, embraced a lot of different kinds of systems in order to get our work done. Now, the problem is that sooner or later, you have to consolidate and analyze data from more than one of those systems. And how often do you do it? I think that there are probably some folks out there right now shaking their head, and that is, again, the vast majority are doing it either 2 or 3 times a week or every day, because, again, Excel is where you do your work. Now, what's interesting is that as industry publications show, there is a growing movement of people who are using hosted or cloud environments, and actually cloud environments are becoming more and more prevalent. And as you can see, we had about 41% that more than a quarter of their systems are either in the cloud or in hosted environments. But today we're going to be talking about how you can get and transform information, again, from Power Query, but then also from BizConnectors in conjunction with BizInsight from BizNet Software, which is probably a pretty good time to launch into a bit of audience participation. I have just 2 polls for you today, and I always enjoy doing these. And the reason is because it gives me an understanding, and it gives us an understanding of what you folks are doing. So I just opened a poll and asked, which of the following connection methods do you use most frequently? And I only want one of these, please, because you probably all do a lot of them. But again, just which of these do you use most frequently? And I can tell you right now, the answer that's coming back is the one that I most expected. We got about half of the people have responded so far. I'll give it just a bit more time, and we'll see how you folks voted. And again, the numbers are still coming in. 75% of you have voted so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the polls. Even when there are lines, you have to close the polls. And as you can see, 67% of you use the tried and true export, import, copy, paste method. 17% of you use some other methods, and that might be a direct connection to a database. It might be BizInsight or BizConnectors. But, again, that's where we are so far. So let's get back to the presentation and see how some of these mechanisms can work. Now, Microsoft Power Query is a free add-in for Microsoft Excel. Power Pivot is another free add-in. In Excel 2016, it's built into the ribbon under the Data tab, and it's called Get and Transform. Our first little example is something that I think is pretty significant because it's so simple, and that is using Power Query to just ask questions and get answers from Wikipedia. So let me go back up. I went too far. There we go. So Power Query, as I said, is an add-in. And in 2013, you have the opportunity to do a data catalog search. You can just type in whatever you'd like to use. And these are the Electoral College results for the United States. We're getting into an election season. But this information isn't really very helpful because it just shows the number of votes by each state within these specific elections. So again, not really all that helpful, but you can also see that you have an opportunity if you've subscribed to Power BI to get a listing of your data catalog searches, or you can also go back to the search and just hover over some of the information within the toolbar on the right-hand side and get just a view of that, or look up something really important like NCAA football rushing leaders or the Major League Baseball standings. So again, just a mechanism to do an ad hoc query. That's kind of the fun stuff. But what about from Excel and the cloud? Now you say, well, now why in the world would I want to use something like Power Query to get information from Excel? And the reason is that it would update that information as the source file was updated. So go back to where I was. There we go. And this time we're going to use from file, and I'm going to get this file from OneDrive for Business. I put it up there. It's just the final budget numbers. I'm going to load this into Excel, and you see that it has both the overall file and just one of the tabs within the file. It's truncated the preview because there's a bit of information there, but it loads 4,758 rows pretty quickly. And notice that you have the opportunity to refresh it. And so this is a way outside of something like SharePoint to have a single version of an Excel workbook and then be able to get back to it. And as with current methodologies, just inside Excel, it's available to you as a connection inside that workbook. But now we can get a little bit more sophisticated, and that is, just last week I did a little blog and a little video comparing and contrasting Power Query to SQL Server. And I used probably an unfair mechanism or methodology, and that is SAP Business One is a very, very powerful ERP system, but it's also, shall we say, complex. One of the reasons is that it's difficult to know what information you're bringing back. So let's get an understanding or an idea of how to use Power Query to bring back information from a database. And within just native Excel, there's an opportunity under the Data tab to connect to servers. And it's similar to this, except that using the Power Query approach, you have a lot more options of data sources. So I connected to SBO Demo US, that's the SAP Business One database. There are 1,991 tables in there. And as you can see, they all have very descriptive names. Now, fortunately, I happen to know, because I downloaded a directory of what these tables are, I happen to know that OINV are customer invoices. And again, the preview's been truncated, and the reason is I think we're going to bring back about 28,000 rows. You can get an editor screen so that you can keep rows or remove rows or choose the columns you want to present. But what we're going to do is we're going to close the editor, load this information, and you'll see the workbook queries panel open again on the right-hand side, doing a little split screen video here so that we can see that, oh yeah, 27,240 rows have loaded, and finally 28,206, and it shows that we've brought back 374 columns of information. Still, 28,000 rows, 374 columns, that just is substantially better than trying to do an export, import, and then copy and paste. That's really quite quick and is pretty impressive. But this, I think, is more impressive. And I've only recently begun to work with the Power BI desktop from Excel. And it is it's another free download. It has an opportunity to use shared storage on the web. You know, that part does have a fee, but just from the free download, there's an opportunity to do some pretty significant work in Excel. One of my functions at BizNet is that I keep track of our web metrics. And so here I'm going to Google Analytics, and it warns me, hey, you're connecting to a third-party service, and now it's going to ask me to sign in, and I just signed in. I didn't want you to know that my password was ... I'm going to connect to Google accounts. We have a couple, one of which is for screencasts. That's a TechSmith service that we use for our online training. But there are 28 tables within Google Analytics just for different kinds of web tracking. I'm going to use the page tracking, and I want to see how many entrances we had, how many page views we had, how long they spent on a page, how many pages they used in a session, and then I'm going, wait a minute, there are lots of things that I could select. Exactly what do I want? Well, yeah, I want to see the page as well. And again, you could load this, but you can see we got information going back to 2009 to 2010 in addition to our current information. So Power BI, I'm looking forward to using it more on bringing back data from external sources, because it has essentially all of the connectivity methods that Power Query does. Now, in our poll just a moment ago, more of you were using Power Pivot than Power Query, and you know, again, pivot tables are a great way to transform data from a purely tabular and columnar mechanism into something that has more depth and more levels of dimensions. The reason that I focused so much on Power Query is because it can just instantly transform that data into a pivot table if you wish. So they can both get you to the same place. But now let's talk about BizConnectors, and we'll do our final poll of the day, and we're going to do just a little bit more video, but then we'll go hands-on here in just a moment. So we'll go to our next poll, and it's just a simple yes or no. Do you currently use BizInsight with BizConnectors? Now, BizInsight has always had the ability to directly connect to data. We call them analysis sets, and you could pull a listing of information from your ERP system or from AR, AP modules within your ERP system and make it available inside BizInsight. And then also there was always direct connectivity with the functions. The BizConnectors are a bit different in that they give you an opportunity to shape that data, to borrow Microsoft's terminology, to get and transform that data. Well, more than 80% of you have voted, and I'll share the results. And I hope that after the next 20 minutes or so, a number of more of you will be definitely interested in BizConnectors as a way of bringing information into Excel. So let's try that same SAP Business One query, or essentially the same SAP Business One query, except this time we'll use a BizConnector. And we're going to get payment detail by invoice date, and we'll get into this query editor more in just a moment. I put in a start date and an end date, and these are rather broad parameters because I don't always know all of the information that's inside our supporting databases. And by the way, folks, that query was real time. There wasn't any cuts or fades. 25,097 rows that quickly. And you can see that within the BizConnector approach, you can, as I said, shape the data. You can choose which columns to return other than just from the standard connector. And this is just one of many, many connectors for BizInsight systems that have BizConnector capability. So again, a little bit of comparison and contrast. We'll get back to solving the problems here in just a moment. Let's look at a way that some of those problems can be solved. This is budget information from Blackbaud Financial Edge, which is one of our newer systems. It is widely used in the nonprofit space. Blackbaud makes Financial Edge for general ledger activities. They make Razor's Edge for fundraising activities and fund management activities. It's very much like a CRM system. Now, this is not the version of this table that I stored to the cloud and then brought back in with Power Query, getting information from a file. And I can show you that there is no data connection to this. Normally, if there was a live connection to a specific worksheet, you'd see an option for data range properties on a right click. But this is just an Excel file. But it's about to become a file that can be used again and again and again through Excel-based BizConnectors. I'm going to select data, and I can select a range of cells, and name it, create it as a table, use an existing range name, or select an existing table. Unfortunately, this is already stored as a table, and you can always tell that whenever Table Tools is highlighted, as you folks well know. I click Next. It shows me that all of these columns are being stored. It tells me how they're being stored. I click Next, and it loaded 204,551 elements in the blink of an eye. Now, what are we going to do with it? Well, all of this information comes from 2013, and it's segmented by period, and it's segmented by account code and by department. So what I want to do is use that connection to query data, and my data's in Excel. It's in a data set called Budget Final. I want not a super function. We'll build some functions here in a minute. I want a table, and I want to select columns that show me the segment 3 and the segment 3 description. And that's really all I want. The reason is I'm going to use those to set up a report really very quickly. And again, this data is in Excel. And, you know, sometimes when you copy and you paste and you make mistakes, you say, man, I wish I hadn't done that. And I wish I hadn't done that. But I can edit this query and say, oh, by the way, remove the duplicates. And I'll overwrite the existing table and put them right back where they should be. So now, however, I want to use connections to data to do something maybe, more interesting. Once again, I'm going to query the data, but this time I want a data validation list. And I want to select the columns for that data validation list, and I want fiscal period. Now, of course, it's easy to do a data validation list on fiscal period. But in this instance, all I have to do is just say yes, and so now I have my fiscal periods available. And again, it's not just a matter of getting data in, but it's a matter of doing something with that data. So I'm going to query the data, and this time I do want a super function, and I want a sum of the year-to-date amount, add a filter where segment 3, and I could say segment 3 is in or not in. I'll show you this just real quickly. If I say in, it will give me checkboxes for all of those segment 3 numbers. Or I can say not in, and it'll do the same because it, again, has a direct connection to that data source. But I'm going to build a more traditional report, and I'll do some cell anchoring and just anchor the column. So there's my segment 3, and I'm going to add one more filter where my fiscal period is equal to my cell D. Well, D1, excuse me. I'm going to drop that super function right there. Now, the reason that formula returned an error was because there was no value in that drop-down. But now I can fill those numbers down and, again, get an understanding of that data. That's the budget data. But one of the things that we promised in the invitation was how to use multiple data sources in the same workbook and actually in the same worksheet. I have a number of BizConnectors running on this machine: Financial Edge, Razor's Edge, our internal practice general ledger, a couple of brand new ones. Applicor, which is a cloud-based application, also available as a business connector and right within the same menu. MAM Autopart General Ledger, another brand new one. But in this instance, I want to use Blackbaud Financial Edge, General Ledger, Transactions, year to date, and I can do transactions year to date by account number or transactions year to date. I'm going to drag that in to that supporting cell, and you notice that by default it wants to create a table to bring back that tabular columnar information. What I want to do instead is get a sum of the year-to-date net. The direct connector will show my company name, and I'm going to pick 2012, and I'm going to pick that fiscal period. I'm going to say OK, and I don't have any data for 2012. So what I'll do is I'll query my data and choose, try a different year. Overwrite the contents. Let's give it one more shot. Okay. I'm just going to flush the cache because I've got similar information already in there from my Excel workbook. I can bring that back pretty quickly. Try this one more time. It's one of those things that seems to always happen. Oh, I wonder if I made a mistake in my query, because once again, I can go back. I still have that connection. I can choose my segment, say OK once again, and the guardians of the demo warriors just came back and helped us once again. So, two different data sources in side-by-side columns in the same worksheet. So, took a little while to get there, but again, you can see how quickly you can use connectors to do something as simple as create a drop-down data validation list and make it available within the workbook to everyone, and also make it available on the sheet to create a list of just the segments. And you'll notice that that table can be refreshed just as analysis sets inside the current version 5 BizInsight can be refreshed. And then also that you can edit that query at any moment. So just a quick example. What I'd like to do though is open a new worksheet and give you an example from the system that probably a majority of you are using today. This is being represented within the BizInsight version 7 platform, which looks a little different than probably a lot of you have used before. And this has Sage 500 and the connectors for accounts payable, receivable, bill of materials, inventory management, project accounting, purchase orders, sales orders, and then just an about that says what version of the software are we using here. And I always like to look at, you know, what folks owe us at any given time. And let's see, you know, what our customer invoice detail is by the invoice date from Sage 500. It's a table. These are all of the columns that are available within that table. I'll choose them all. Again, I don't have to go guessing for my company ID. I can use the ever popular Systems of America. Now, start date information is always going to be manual, and the reason is because they're just, as you can expect, in a table of 20,000 rows or whatever, there are going to be 20,000 begin and end dates. But again, I'll choose a broad query range here, say OK, drop that into my sheet, and this information is now available to this workbook within cache. A moment ago, I flushed the cache just because I had been dealing with a lot of different data sources. But if I choose to view data here, it's going to show me what is in service data. And this is data that is currently in memory inside my machine that shows me that we have our customer invoice detail and we have our general ledger transactions year to date. Those general ledger transactions year to date are from Blackbaud Financial Edge. This AR customer invoice detail is, of course, from Sage 500. And the point here is that you can even mix and match different data sources like that, not just inside Excel, but other systems that you've made a connection to some way or another. And very much like that connection that I made using Power Query to an Excel file, that information will be updated anytime you choose to refresh the table or anytime within the new BizInsight interface you choose to refresh workbooks. So it is a live data source both inside the workbook and directly from the supporting ERP. Now, one of the promises we made in the invitation was a glimpse into the connector roadmap, including connections to probably what's considered to be the world's #1 cloud application. And if you didn't guess, that cloud application is Salesforce. And we are hard at work on refining our Salesforce connectivity. I was going to give you a sneak peek of that actual interface, thought better of it. But you can expect to see that announcement from BizNet Software in the very near future. You're also going to see an announcement from BizNet Software in the very near future of the availability of a new updated BizInsight platform that will not only support these version 7 applications, as you've seen here, but will also support your current legacy applications. And the upshot of that is that you'll have a seamless migration path into a new interface, into the ability to do things like create data validation lists and store information and pull specific columns of information from your ERP systems. You'll have that as well as the traditional method of using BizInsight functions to bring back your data. You'll also be able to store the queries that you've made at any given time, whether they be super functions or tables. Now, this query is available just by going to the navigation pane, but if I choose to save this, then it's immediately available to me to drag and drop. Similarly, if I choose to save this Blackbaud Financial Edge query, in this instance, I need to go back to the query editor. I can save this. And keep those specific parameters. So again, we've covered a lot of ground today, but what we've done is given you some ideas about how you can maybe more seamlessly connect to external data using the Microsoft tools, and we certainly work with those queries that you extract from Power Query or from Power Pivot are available within the select data function inside the BizInsight suite. So you can use your current tools to do that. You can use your current export, import, copy, paste tools to do that with the BizInsight suite and BizConnectors, and then you can put those things together from multiple data sources in the same worksheet. Plus, got just a bit of a hint at some things that are coming, and you see a number of applications that are already available here. Cloud applications as well. BizNet Software is the manufacturer, the provider of Excel Connect within the Epicor world. We have cloud connectivity for Epicor 10, and within the Intact world, branded as BizInsight, we have cloud connectivity for Intact, and then as you see, also another cloud application, Applicor, directly connected to BizInsight. We'll go back and finish things up. Just a quick wrap up. At BizNet, we love Excel. Our business is based on Excel. And what we help you do is solve some of the problems in Excel. And yeah, Excel reporting can be a time suck, particularly when you have to keep going back to data sources. And whenever you can't drill into those numbers from different data sources. And I didn't talk today about Biz Broadcast, but certainly we can make those reports available on a variety of different parameters, a variety of different formats to just about any audience. So BizConnectors, right now we have like more than 50 pre-built real-time system connections. More are coming as we expand into different systems. BizInsight 7 lets you use those connectors to create live interactive Excel reports, and BizBroadcast lets you distribute those reports. There are lots of tools to attack the problems. We're a complement to these things. You can use our tools to create dashboards, or you can use other dashboard reporting tools and feed them with BizInsight. Certainly there are data visualization tools that, and Power BI is one of them. probably a number of you are dealing with big data types of systems and business intelligence types of systems. And we don't necessarily mean to replace any of those things. We mean to complement those things, because we work in Excel, which is where a lot of that data is going to show up anyway. So if it's going to come to Excel, bring it on in. Let us help you work with it. Let us complement your efforts. And now let's see what some questions are. I'm just going to leave the question panel up. And yes, folks, thanks for letting me know that I left up the poll results. And let's see, when linking to source transactional ERP data, I believe Excel places locks on the data while downloading. It interferes with day-to-day processing. The question is, how does BizNet connect to ERP data, and does it place locks on the data? BizNet connects to ERP data primarily through structured query language queries. It does not lock the data. It brings back the data as of that moment in time based on the parameters that were input into that system. So excellent question. I appreciate that. How are BizConnectors different than the desktop version? Well, the desktop version is being rolled into BizInsight, and that is one of the differences. The desktop version dealt only with data that lives inside Excel, and BizConnectors can integrate data from a number of different data sources as well as from inside Excel. How do we get BizInsight query? We currently don't have that function to select. And again, I suspect that's because you're working with the legacy BizInsight version 5 platform. You will soon have access to the functionality that I was showing this morning. When you save the report, like your AR example, when you go back to it days later, will it update from external sources? If that, and yes, excellent question, and the answer is yes, if that source is a connection within Excel. For example, whenever I loaded Excel using Power BI, and you notice I had an opportunity to refresh, since it's a table, if we had stored that inside BizInsight, then that table would refresh whenever we did a refresh workbook and refresh that table. Is there a connector for Microsoft Dynamics GP for accounts payable? We have a BizInsight version 5 content pack for Dynamics GP accounts payable, and I do believe that Dynamics is on the development list. Another question about Dynamics, are these usable with Dynamics SL? And yes, actually, even with the AR/AP content packs, you can store that data in Excel and use that connection to drive functions. Are connectors available for X3? Not at the moment. I set myself a timer. Can BizNet be used as a bridge for multiple systems, including old legacy batch systems such as AS400? We're actually working with a provider now that has a system that runs on an AS400. And again, anything that you can export to Excel, we can work with by using an Excel connection inside BizInsight. Is there going to be a cost when moving from BizInsight to BizInsight version 7? No, that'll be available to folks that are on support. Do you need the BizInsight suite in order to query various tables within the ERP system? You'll need connectors for those various tables, such as ARAP, inventory management, purchase orders, sales orders. And as we did with the previous content packs, there is an additional charge for the connectors. Is it limited to RDBS systems? No. Again, anything that you can bring into Excel can be used within an Excel connector, and then also we've already established some connectors for things that are not just relational database systems, such as the cloud version of Intact and Applicor. And then finally, my version is 5.3, but is that the latest version on the website? And this is going to be our last question. Within the licensing and download center, as version 7 applications are rolled out, they'll be available there. And so, and again, within the month, you'll all be getting an email from BizNet Software talking about the release of BizInsight version 7 with backward compatibility to your current version 5. Hey folks, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate your no, there is one last question, and this is it. Do you have connectors for Sage 500? And yeah, that's the last thing that that we looked at were the connectors for Sage 500 GL, AR, AP, inventory, project, sales orders, purchase orders, and I'm probably missing one. But that is it, folks. And again, thank you so much. All of us at BizNet Software truly appreciate your business, and have a great day. Goodbye now.